Tim Wu, The Curse of Bigness, Antitrust in the New Gilded Age. In Tim Wu's insightful book, The Curse of Bigness, Antitrust in the New Gilded Age, the author delves into the historical and contemporary challenges faced by industrialized economies regarding economic concentration and monopoly power. This book summary will take us through the Gilded Age, discussing the dominance of trusts and monopolistic companies in the American economy and their impact on society. We'll also examine the antitrust movement led by Theodore Roosevelt, which sought to dismantle these monopolies and ensure market competition. Overall, we'll explore the consequences of monopolistic control, the government's efforts to counterbalance it, and the potential for future reform.
The Age of Economic Concentration. The Gilded Age, from the 1870s to 1900, saw an unprecedented concentration of economic power in the United States. Corporations merged into trusts, which became dominant players in nearly every major industry, with some reaching monopolistic status. Famous names of the era, such as John D. Rockefeller and Andrew Carnegie, amassed vast fortunes through their monopolistic companies. The most successful monopolist of all was banker J.P. Morgan, who achieved monopolies in a range of industries. These men were the main drivers of the pro-monopoly trust movement, which we'll explore in the next section. The trust movement's take on monopolies. The trust movement believed that monopolies were a superior form of economic organization that provided stability and efficiency to markets. They saw competition as chaotic and blamed it for the economic turmoil that had plagued the industrialized economies of the 1890s. Monopolies provided centralized control of the markets, ending the constant volatility and fragmented disarray of competition between multiple smaller companies. They accomplished this by creating economies of scale, which enabled more efficient production and lower prices. The trust movement's defense of monopolies. The trust movement believed that monopolies were the natural byproduct of capitalist competition. They argued that monopolies were the most capable and resilient companies in their respective markets, having outcompete all other companies. The trust movement's perspective was informed by social Darwinism, which argued that an entity's survival was dependent on its adaptation to its environment. They believed that laissez-faire economics was the best approach to the market, resisting all forms of governmental intervention on behalf of the public. However, they supported government-led eugenics programs, taking the idea of letting the weak and poor perish one step further. The pros and cons of corporate bigness. In this book summary, the advantages and disadvantages of monopolist companies are explored. While larger companies benefit from economies of scale, they eventually suffer from diseconomies of scale. As a company grows bigger, it becomes more complex and less adaptable to changes in the market. Moreover, a monopolist can decrease wages, increase work hours, and raise prices with impunity, making it hard for workers and consumers to turn to other options. In addition to creating barriers to entry into their markets, monopolists can wield their influence over political power. Corporate power and government influence. The monopolies and oligopolies dominant in concentrated industries exert great influence over the government to maintain their power and profitability. In the Gilded Age, Rockefeller and other businessmen used their economic strength to sway the government into withholding permits and bankrupting competitors. Today, oligopolies like the pharmaceutical industry spend millions to lobby the government for policies that further their interests, resulting in billions of additional revenue. These companies can easily organize and present a united front, making them more powerful than millions of diverse citizens. The government must exert serious authority to push back against this influence and protect consumers. Trustbusting in the U.S. The U.S. government's pursuit in breaking monopolies and trusts started with the passing of the first antitrust law in 1890, the Sherman Act. Despite initial resistance from some administrations, Theodore Roosevelt saw monopolies as a threat to democracy and filed 45 antitrust lawsuits during his presidency. The policy of trust-busting continued through the 20th century, leading to the breakup of many monopolies, including Standard Oil, into 34 separate companies. Trustbusting and the fight for democracy. The government's trust-busting efforts resumed after the Great Depression and World War II due to the alarming consequences of monopolies' unchecked power, as seen in fascist states like Nazi Germany. The Anti-Merger Act was passed to prevent the formation of such monopolies and maintain democracy. Trust-busting was seen as a vital part of preventing the dangers of fascism and communism. AT&T, the rise and fall of a super-monopolist. In 1974, Telecommunications Corporation AT&T was the largest company in the world, and it had been a monopoly for 6 decades, controlling 6 or 7 monopolies at once. Despite government regulation, which often worked in AT&T's favor, the company ignored policies aimed at fostering competition. This led to antitrust lawsuits which broke up the monopoly into 7 regional telephone companies and allowed for numerous competitors and innovations to flood the market, including modems and emerging mobile phone companies. This serves as a prime example of the dangers of monopolies and the benefits of trust-busting, but these practices have fallen by the wayside, leading to economic concentration. Robert Bork and the narrow interpretation of the Sherman Act. Robert Bork, a legal scholar who studied law at the University of Chicago, proposed a narrow interpretation of the Sherman Act in his landmark 1966 paper. His interpretation claimed that the act was targeted at one thing: consumer welfare. Bork's simple litmus test for whether a monopolistic company ran afoul of the Sherman Act significantly disempowered trustbusters, as it was difficult to prove that prices would be lower if a monopolist were out of the picture. Lawyers and judges liked Bork's interpretation because of its simplicity and apparent scientific rigorousness. Bork's interpretation gained popularity in law schools and courts throughout the 1980s and 1990s, until even the Supreme Court was espousing it in 2004. The Resurgence of Monopolies. The book describes how the trust-busting movement lost its momentum since the success of Bork's reinterpretation of the Sherman Act. The Clinton administration's antitrust suit against Microsoft in the 1990s marked the end of the trust movement. Since then, monopolies and oligopolies have made a comeback in different industries such as cable, airlines, pharmaceuticals, and technology. The Justice Department's failure to pursue anti-monopoly cases or block mergers during the Bush administration resulted in a few giant corporations, including AT&T and Verizon, dominating the cable industry and raising their prices. The book also highlights the pharmaceutical industry's monopoly pricing, resulting in skyrocketing drug prices. Even entertainment and alcohol industries have experienced mergers, leaving a few conglomerates controlling significant market shares. The author stresses that the ubiquity of economic concentration seems daunting, but several potential solutions can address this situation. Tackling monopolies and oligopolies. Governments need to shift from consumer welfare to protecting competition by introducing simple rules and market investigations to break monopolies and oligopolies. Mergers leading to too much concentration should be banned, and concentrated industries under one company for more than 10 years should be investigated. The government should not be afraid to break up big corporations since they are already divided into functional subunits. Trust-busting is crucial to prevent the private power of concentrated industries from overpowering the public power of democratic governments. As concentration poses a more significant danger than elevated prices, a sharp focus is needed to preserve competitive markets.
As we conclude our exploration of Tim Wu's The Curse of Bigness, Antitrust in the New Gilded Age, we are reminded that unchecked monopolies and economic concentration can wield destructive power over workers, consumers, and even the government. Throughout history, antitrust movements and legislation have aimed to maintain an equilibrium in the market, promoting healthy competition and avoiding adverse effects of monopolistic domination. Today, it's crucial to acknowledge that the fight against monopolies and oligopolies is still essential, with strategies like A. Protection of competition tests, B. Banning of mergers that reduce market competition, and C. Instituting market investigations laws. By revisiting and rediscovering the trust-busting tradition, we can strive to maintain a robust, competitive democracy in the face of ever-present challenges.